So, if you're feeling stuck as a freelance writer, being in freeze mode or flight mode or fight mode, those things really happen as a freelance writer. You end up getting in these situations where you're not really sure of your next step, you don't know what to do, you feel like everything is in the poop soup, right? And I feel like these things are not talked about enough. A lot of times we talk about uh, reaching better clients or making more money or um, fixing our marketing or doing a better pitch or reaching out to editors and following up. But we don't really always talk about how it's a thing where you get stuck or where you're not really sure what your next move is, or you're just feeling like the self-doubt tapes and the imposter syndrome and the beating yourself up, hello, is really kind of taking over. So that's what we're talking about today. And I think this is a really important topic. I'm going to make sure I fix the camera because we have our snug friend here, but it's like a little bit messed up. There we go. There she is. There she is. So we're going to talk about that today, and I think it's really important. Announcement before we get into stuff. Runway is open for enrollment until 8/10. So until next Thursday, Runway is open at a super special price of $49. So if you've known the program a little bit, I ran it in March, but then I created a lifetime version. So basically this version, the live version, is me teaching every single day with you Monday through Friday. Plus, you get a live bonus masterclass with me on a topic of your choice. So everyone in the community gets to vote. And then we all get to have this masterclass on a topic that people are looking for more information on. So Runway is open at $49. It's normally $249, so it's $200 off for the live class. The lifetime one is that you get to keep everything, right? But this one, the live one, is $49, $200 off. Go to mandyellis.com/runway to check it out. It's open for enrollment until 8/10. So next Thursday, right? Yeah. Next Thursday, August 10th, is the last day to enroll. And I know I'm going to get this question, but I'm probably going to run Runway not until March or April. There is a slight chance of showers of Runway in January, but it's probably more likely that I'll do it in March or April. So if you want to join Runway at $49, mandyellis.com/runway. It's open for enrollment until Thursday, August 10th. Let's get to our topic. Hey, Karen. Howdy. I like the howdy. All right, let's talk about this. Okay, let's talk about number one. So number one thing when we're looking for here is what does it look like when we're stuck or we're stopped? So a lot of times this is that I think from what I've seen in my own business and what I've seen with students is like you just let all of the internal garbage kind of take over. So you let all of those negative thoughts, or you let all of the things like the self-doubt things, or telling you you're not good enough, or that you'll never be good enough, or you can't compare to these other writers, or that the quality of your work sucks, or that you can never get clients. Like you really let those tapes in your head win. So I think that's the thing I see the most is like a lot of people are letting their mind and these kind of running anxious thoughts and these running really like they're shitty thoughts. They're things that you tell yourself that just aren't true. They let those take over. So when those take over, then they kind of have this really frustrating situation where they're not really sure how to move forward. They just get stuck in their tracks, right? They're just not moving anywhere. They're just in the same tracks. And I think a lot of times that is just kind of understanding that the tape doesn't run your life, right? You're going to have a lot of thoughts all the time. You're going to have all kinds of thoughts all the time, but we don't have to let those thoughts win. I think this is something that I've talked about a few times, but I know it sounds nuts sometimes when I talk about it, but for me, one of the things that really helped was to tell myself like stop it out loud, or tell myself no out loud. Because when I was in my head, literally just vocalizing like stop out loud, I was like, oh, like there's other stuff going on. Like I would, you just sit silently, shitting on yourself, right? You're just sitting there thinking all these horrible thoughts in complete silence. But then if you're like thinking these thoughts, stop, and you say it out loud, you're like, oh, there's other stuff. It's a really weird thing that I started doing with myself just to make the tapes stop and for me to remember that like all of these thoughts are in my head. It doesn't mean they're real. And it definitely doesn't mean that that they're my future or that they can predict how my business is going to go. So that's something I think is really helpful. Like when you're having a lot of thoughts, like say just stop out loud or no. Like sometimes if you say no out loud, you end up being like, no, that's not the truth, or no, that's not a thing, or stop, just stop. And you really kind of get yourself out of your mind and back into the real world, right? So that was the first thing I started doing just to handle the tapes. The other thing is that I think this sounds crazy, but as someone who, like, when I get really anxious, I start just writing things down. So sometimes I will just write pages and pages and pages. Like sometimes one time I wrote like 10 pages or 15 pages, I forget the number, but I was just really anxious and I just started writing all of these terrible things that were going to happen. And then as I kept writing, I was like, well, the likelihood of these things happening is incredibly low. And then as I'm writing, I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm getting it out of my system, now that I'm writing it on paper, or if you want to type it out, you start realizing like, wait a minute, all of these things coming true at once are just, it's unlikely, right? If you write 10 pages of notes about all the horrible things that can happen or all of your horrible attributes, you get to a place where you're like, wait a minute, like this isn't real. Like this can't actually happen. Hey, Flower Power. And you just kind of, you're just like, wait a minute, let's kind of recalibrate here. So if you are kind of dealing with a lot of stuff in your mind, I think writing it down and just seeing the wealth of thoughts that you're going through, these really negative, trash talky, like imposter syndrome, self-doubt, negative spiral kind of stuff, you see the wealth of things and you're like, there's no way 100% of those things can happen, right? Even if one or two happens, like I can figure it out. So I think just writing that down really, really helps. And it's also a way for you to get moving forward. So getting these things outside of your brain, outside of like marination station of your mind, I think you can actually see that the amount of things, like the tornado of thoughts in your mind is just a tornado. You start seeing like there's so many thoughts. Of course you can't move forward. Of course you're stuck. Of course you're, doing all these things that are self-destructive or not helping you, move into the career that you really like. So I think a lot of times we're dealing with the tapes, we're dealing with a lot of thoughts in our mind, and the last thing here I want to mention is the comparing. I did so much compare and despair, and I still do it. There's plenty of times where I just fall in the pothole of compare and despair. So it's not like I'm immune to it, but I do think a lot of times writers compare and despair and they end up getting stuck, or they end up not moving forward because they're like, oh, I'll never be like this person, or I can't write about this because of this thing, or my pitch will never be accepted, or blah, blah, blah. What did I miss? Hi, Vicky. I always love the wave. Vicky, we're at the part where we're talking about what it looks like to be stuck or stopped. So that's what we're going over now. So we're going over like saying stop out loud or saying no out loud when you're kind of ruminating in your head. If you say something out loud, it kind of takes you out of that. And two, we're going over writing down all of your negative thoughts. And when you see the wealth of those thoughts, you're like, there's no way 100% of those things can come true or even are true. Karen says, I call it spinning brain, like a vicious cycle of negativity over things I can't control or things I think might happen. Drives me crazy. It totally does. Yeah, and it is. It's exactly like the spinning wheel, right? Like on a Mac, it has a little colorful wheel when it's like, hold on, I'm thinking. So yeah, it's totally a vicious cycle of negativity, and it does drive you crazy. That's the thing, is we need to focus on what we can control. And there's also this idea that I think is really helpful in, like, someone said this, not me, someone else said this, where they said, like, if beating yourself up worked, it would have worked by now. And that really changed a lot of my own thoughts about it. Like, if beating myself up worked, it would have worked by now, right? I would have been way more successful after decades of beating myself up, right? But it's just not the case. Beating yourself up doesn't work. It just saps you of all your motivation. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you stopped from moving into a business you like. And I think that that's just something that is like think about that. Like, if you were beating yourself up, hold on, I have to cough. Okay. If you were beating yourself up, let's say for most of your life, let's say a few decades, right? Several decades, and you're not where you want to be, obviously that's not working. So if we can spend all this time beating ourselves up, why can't we spend time not beating ourselves up and cheering ourselves on and doing things that kind of help build our self-confidence rather than tearing it down, right? So sidebar on that. But compare and despair is something I still do. So comparing and despairing is like you keep looking at other people's work or other people's clients or other people's income or their lifestyle or whatever. And you're like, I will never have that. And so then you just fall into despair. And yeah, Karen, exactly. If beating yourself up worked, it would have worked by now, right? That was an idea that really changed kind of my mindset. Hi Vesna, welcome. So when you're looking at other people's stuff, I feel like the switch that I made was like, this is possible. Instead of looking at someone's stuff and being like, I'll never be able to do that. I'm not good enough. I suck at everything. I'll never be able to fix these things. I'll never get faster. I'll never do blah, blah, blah. Whatever your tape is. I started saying like, wow, maybe I could do that because someone else did, right? I switched the tape in my head from compare and despair to like, oh, it's possible. I started looking at it as like, oh, it's possible for someone to do that, or it's possible for another writer to do it so I can figure it out. Like I can get there. I think that switch is really important. Compare and despair just totally shuts it down, right? It makes it seem like it's 100% not possible, that you can't do it, all that stuff. But if you switch it to, oh, someone else could do it, so maybe I can too, just giving yourself the possibility that you could win, right, and get things done, that really opens up a lot of doors and it gets you kind of back into being motivated to move forward. So I think those things are, those switches out of compare and despair and then back to your, like, back to like a, okay, there's a chance, like there's a chance it can work out. Eventually what ends up happening is we're going from like 0% chance of it working out to maybe there's a chance, to then after a while of living in maybe there's a chance, then what ends up happening is you get to a place where you build a lot more confidence. So that's what it kind of did for me. I feel like a lot of people are like, no, just go from A to B. Just go from like negative stuff to positive stuff. And that just didn't work for me. I needed like a chaotic neutral. I needed like a middle place where I could kind of still shit on myself, but kind of believe in myself. So for me, that middle place really helped me get to a place of being more confident and to quiet a lot of the tapes in my head. So instead of comparing and despairing, I gave myself the chaotic neutral middle ground of like, like I kind of suck, but like I probably can do it. And then you kind of move more, like you spend, 80% of your time in like, I know I can do it. I know I can figure it out. It's possible because somebody else did it. And then 20% of the time you're like, I'm a dum-dum. Why did I eat all that fruit from the dum-dum tree, right? That kind of thing. So I think kind of understanding all those things and really giving yourself a neutral place, like a kind of a middle place between the two, is I think more helpful in making the stick to it's possible and being confident in yourself more permanent. I find that a lot of times for me, when I was trying to just go from like negative tapes just to switch those to positive, it just became a disaster for me. Like I just couldn't, I was just like, I can't go from like A to B. Like I can't go from completely negative to completely positive. I need some kind of weird forestry middle ground where I kind of have to find my own path and I have to let myself have both negative and positive thoughts before I can switch to mostly, negative. And or mostly positive, right? Mostly positive. And the other thing is that you're going to have negative thoughts. That's something that I think comes with moving out of your comfort zone, right? So when you're moving out of your comfort zone and you are getting into a place where you're doing hard stuff, you're learning how to work with different clients, you're learning to work on different types of content, there's always going to be these negative thoughts. That's kind of part of getting out of your comfort zone, is kind of overcoming those mindset roadblocks, right? So every time I get into something new, it just becomes, it becomes like I get, these thoughts again. It's not like you completely erase them. Everybody has them, right? Everybody has them. Like athletes, right? When athletes have a few bad races or they have a few, terrible games or matches or whatever, they have negative thoughts. It's not like they're like, this was just a bad one, right? If it keeps repeating, right? Then they're like, is this going to be it? Is this the end of my career? Am I really bad? Right? Everybody at every different level has these as they grow and change and get out of their comfort zone. I think the management of that is the important part of moving beyond, right? Getting through the freeze thing or the flight thing, right? This is kind of handling our thoughts, but also understanding that like the wealth of these negative thoughts, like the probability that most of them will come true is just not a thing. And then last thing on this one, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to put this in two. So let's talk about two, but then also let's do a little snork update because she's down there. Hold on. Okay, let's do a little snork update. So there she is. She looks so cute. Okay, so let's talk about. I know she heard me say her name. She's like, "Hello, it's me." So here's the thing: Charlotte is off the drugs. She's off the drugs. We've been telling her she's been on drugs for a long time. So she's off the drugs for her teeth. It seems like we were worried she had an infection, but it seems like she doesn't. Do you want a snack? Okay. I hear you making grumbly noises. So she seems to be doing a lot better. She's still like not super enthusiastic about eating, like everyday eating, but she's getting better. And she made like a cute little growly woo noise this morning that she hasn't made in a really long time. So it seems like she's doing better. And good girl. So she's able to eat kind of crunchy stuff more now. Good girl. And she seems like she's doing a little better. So Charlotte's kind of been through a lot, right? We lost Bo a couple months ago, and that's been really hard on her. And because he was her buddy, you know, she was with him pretty much most of her life. We picked up Charlotte from APA here in Austin, and she was about 3.5, and now she's almost 11. She's 10.5 now. So she spent 7 years, most of her life, with Bo, and him passing away was really difficult for her. So that was one thing. And then she had this dental, right? Her dental, where she got 4 teeth removed, and she was really sensitive about eating. Good girl. So she's still really sensitive about eating. It seems like things are getting a little bit easier, a little bit better. She's kind of getting back to being a sassy woo machine. So we've all been having kind of a rough few months, but she seems to be getting better. Yeah? Feeling a little better? Yeah. Good job. All right, let's move along. Okay. Let's talk about 2. So here's the thing. When we're moving forward and seeing progress, this is about kind of sometimes just doing it in spite of your feelings. So a lot of times, for me, the biggest motivator is a deadline. If I have work and I have a deadline, that makes me move forward. Like if I just sit there and do nothing and I don't have any deadlines or I don't have, stuff to do, that's way worse than if you're kind of at least moving forward, either sending pitches or LOIs, or you have current client work where you're just like, I don't have time for these thoughts. I don't have time to stay stuck where I am. I have to do this deadline. The deadline really kind of like puts a fire under your butt. Karen says, our new puppy was named Bo by the breeder. We changed it to Taz because Bo and No were confusing him. Oh, you know what? We made that joke all the time. I love the name Taz, number 1. 2, we joked so Bo was named Bo. It was the same spelling, B-O. Tommy's sister actually named him. And so anyways, we always joke that he was named Bo because we just told him no all the time because he was just naughty all the time. So we always joked that he was named Bo because that was the only name that was like no, because all we did was tell him no because he was always doing something naughty. That's funny. Okay, back to the topic. I know, I see you. You're so cute and snuggly. You're so cute and snuggly. Good girl. So as we're kind of moving forward, deadlines really help, right? But I know that a lot of times when we're stuck in this phase, it more has to do with just getting clients, right? So if we're kind of stopped and stuck, you have to remember, for me, I just kind of made it really small. I would make it bite-sized. Can I send 1 LOI today? Can I find 1 potential client? Can I add somebody to the potential client list? Can I do a little research? I would just make it super bite-sized so that I was like, oh, I can do 1 thing, right? Then if I'm doing all of these, yeah, we should have changed Bo's name too, but it just stuck. So we always kind of joked about how many names we would have given Bo. We would have given him so many names. In any case, so when we're moving forward, we are kind of making it into that idea of like, how do you eat an elephant bite by bite, right? It's that idea of like, you can't eat an elephant in 1 day. You have to eat an elephant in bite by bite. We're using this as a frame. We're not eating any elephants for real. But the idea is like something is so large, you have to eat it bite by bite. Like there's no other way to do it. And if you want to think about it as like breaking tasks down into something that is manageable. So in order to move out of these kind of stuckness or these stopped places in your business, you have to do something. You have to remind yourself that every single day you need to take a step forward in your business. I don't care how small it is. I don't care if you feel like it's inconsequential. Just do something little. And the more you do little things add up into big things every single time, right? It's kind of like it's kind of like I forget what it is, but it was like basically like McDonald's iced tea or sweet tea has like 26 teaspoons of sugar. So like if I'm taking like just a few teaspoons of sugar, you're like, that's not that much. But if I do 26, you're like, that's too much sugar, right? This is kind of the same idea. We're just doing a little bit of a teaspoon every single day. We don't have to eat a pound of sugar. We just have to do a little teaspoon, right? So we're breaking it down. Like, I don't care if you're connecting with someone on LinkedIn, you're following up, you're answering an email, you're adding someone to your potential client list, whether that's a publication or whether that's a business, you're sending a pitch, you're sending an LOI, you're setting up some technology. You got to do something every single day. I'm telling you, like, the more you do something every single day to move your business forward, the more confident you feel, the quieter those tapes get, and the more you feel like you can actually do something in your business rather than stay stuck or stay stopped, right? So just little things, just do something small. I feel like a lot of times this goes back to another idea is like writer's block, right? A lot of people like to talk about writer's block. And I am one of those people who I just don't believe in that. I just don't. I used to. For many, many years, I used to. And then I realized that writer's block is just like another idea that keeps you stuck. You're like, oh, I can't. I have writer's block. No, you have a deadline. Do it now. Like, there's a lot of times where I was like, I don't know what to say. Doesn't matter. Write anything. Literally write anything. Just get started. This is something that I think a lot of times writers who haven't really written a ton, they're like looking at a blank page. You should never be looking at a blank page, okay? This is why a lot of our stories, like when you're working on journalistic pieces or research-based pieces or anything with interviews from subject matter experts, you have notes. Put the notes in, right? Make a structure. Give yourself kind of an outline. Put your notes in. Put some thoughts in. I don't care if you have no interviews, no research, no nothing. You should pretty much always have research. We should not be starting from the blank page. There should be some kind of context from what you're writing from. But this idea of writer's block, I feel like, is someone just staring at a blank page. That's not a thing. Even people who write books, right? People who write fiction, nonfiction, poetry, whatever, you're not starting with a blank page. You're starting with an idea, right? You're starting with an idea for a poem or some kind of outline for a book or some kind of character thing. Write anything. Something is always better than nothing, because I can guarantee you, and I'm telling you from my own work, there are lots of times where I've written an intro paragraph and I think to myself like, wow, this is the dumbest thing I've ever written. And then I write the rest of the piece. The rest of the piece, the other, let's say like 30% of it is fine. But that's what editing is for, right? So we have to actually construct the thing so we can go back and fix the beginning. The beginning is always going to suck. It's always going to be the hard part. It's always going to be the place where you're like, I don't know what the fuck to say, right? Always. Even now, after writing for more than 10 years, I hate intro paragraphs. They are the worst. They are always hard because you really have to do a lot of work to get someone into the story. You really have to do a lot of work to have someone continue reading. And it's a lot to smartly and interestingly kind of almost summarize the piece or really draw someone in with a sharp quote or something like that. Like, it's really hard to do. That's why people think writer's block exists, because they get stuck in this intro paragraph garbage, which it's always going to be garbage. Your intro paragraph will be garbage until you turn the thing in, until you go through edits a couple times, until you kind of work out the rest of the meat of the piece. Because once you've written the rest of the piece, now we can go back and kind of fix the intro, because we're like, oh, I know what the other 70% is going to be. Now I can fix the beginning because I know what the rest is, right? So like, I used to believe in writer's block. And this would keep me stop and stuck because I look at a blank page, no blank page. No matter what you're writing, there should be an outline or some kind of set of notes or research or quotes or something to start with. Where I just think that's poor writing to start with a blank page. You need structure to your job as a writer is to relay ideas in this kind of like layer cake kind of way. Someone gets through the first layer. Okay, now we layer on the second bit of information. Now we layer on that. This is how they follow the train of thought, whether that thing is a chapter or an article, right? So our job is to layer. If we're not having some kind of outline or some kind of something to grab onto, and we're just starting with a blank page, you're writing, and I've seen this a bunch, it becomes muddied, it becomes confused, it's all over the place, it has no logical sense of taking the reader through. And I'm talking to you as someone who hated outlines. Many, many years, I would never write an outline. And I think it actually really hurt my writing. Now, when I do an outline, I still do it bare bones. So like I will put the questions that I'm answering, right? That will be the outline. So I'll say, here's a question, right? Here's a question I'm answering. Here's the 4 questions I'm answering in this article. And then I will put my research, my quotes, my stuff into those things. So the outline itself is like questions I'm answering, then research and quotes go in each specific section. And then sometimes if I'm doing a certain article, I'll put some quotes in the intro that I feel like are good. But if I'm writing like a blog post, I'm still putting in questions I'm answering or things that need to be covered. Then I'm putting in research or information of some kind, right? That kind of helps you get through the process. I just think this is more like whenever I think of the blank page, I think of like the Carrie Bradshaw version of people think like what freelance writers do. We don't do any of that. That's not our life. Like, and there's a lot, right? Like Carrie Bradshaw, the whole idea like of that is right, that she's like a freelance writer, but she has a column and she doesn't seem to pitch anything except randomly she pitches Vogue and gets something. Like every once in a while she does pitches, but she doesn't actually run a business. She just writes a column, right? Which isn't really the same thing. So it's not like that at all. We are starting with structure. We are starting with information. This is why a lot of people get stuck when they work for clients for the first time, because they're like, oh, I'm supposed to write a blog post about this. Well, go research it. Go read other articles. Go find a study. Go find some kind of information to inform your article. You can't just write it from, the electrical meat in your mind, right? It's not how it works. So for me, no longer buying into the idea of writer's block and really giving myself a chance at success by setting things up in that doc. It doesn't matter how shitty it is, at least it's organized, right? Then I can go back and edit it. And most of the time when I'm writing a blog post or an article or anything, case study, white paper, content strategy deck, everything I write the first time is garbage. I do a garbage draft. This is what I tell my students, right? Whether you want to join Runway, which is open right now, right? I talked about that in the beginning. If you want to join Runway, mandyellis.com/runway, $49, $200 off lifetime right now. So whether you'd want to join Runway or the Wealth Lab, right? I tell my students this all the time. Barf draft. Blech, put everything on the page. Blech, put all your notes in there and then just write it. Blech, put all your thoughts in there. Because if you get all of your thoughts out of your head onto paper, now we can actually move forward, right? We can actually get to somewhere. And then we can edit out all the extra stuff when we go in to clean it up and hit the word count, right? Those things are really important. I think that barf draft idea frees you from being like, this thing has to be perfect, or no, that idea won't work. It allows you to have give and take and really let your article take shape in the way it's supposed to. Like you're following the information, right? Yeah, electrical meat. I always think of my brain as like electrical meat. I just think of like sometimes when I'm trying to, like remind myself that all the thoughts in my head are crazy. I'm like, these thoughts are coming from electrical meat. Why are we listening to electrical meat? Vesna says, I can't agree more. Just last week, I thought I had nothing to say. Then I opened my notes and actually looked at them and the answers were right there. Exactly. I think about this all the time. Hi, Woo. Woo thinks about this all the time too, right, Woo? You think about this all the time. You look like you've been planted, like you're finally growing out of the blankets and into the world. You're so cute. I think about this all the time, right? We have notes, we have information, we have ideas. This is like when someone starts writing and they're like, how do you do this? Well, if you haven't done any research into your topic, that's a big problem. I don't care if your topic is really, really basic. Even if you're writing a blog post that's like 500 words, which is not good. You should be writing longer than that because 500 words is not good. But even if we're writing a super short blog post, let's say 600 words, your material needs to be based in like fact, right? Your material needs to be based in what's going on. That means you need to do research. You need to read other pieces. You don't just like randomly go off into nothingness and just type a bunch of stuff with no information. That would be crazy, right? That would be crazy. That wouldn't be a very good article at all. I hate intros. I hate them so much, Vesna. I can't even I every single time the place where I spend the most time is an intro. Pretty much like if I'm really struggling with an article, what ends up happening is the bottom 60% is fine and the top 40% is trash. So like my intro is 20% of that 40% usually, right? Typically, not always, but and we're not saying like an intro paragraph. I'm saying introducing like the article, like weaving in my points, right? So like whenever I kind of do, you look so cute. I can't believe you look so cute over there. Whenever I start that, I know that like if I'm really struggling, that the top 40% of my stuff is going to be terrible. But at least if it's written and I can go back and edit it, it gets better. But yes, the beginning is always hard. There is no magic bullet that will make it easier. Like it's just not there. Albert says, writer's block is a fiction writer's phenomena. It's not applicable to freelance writers and journalists because you have to have the discipline to consistently write. I think that, so I started with fiction stuff. So I was in, like, when I went to school, I did a lot of fiction writing, and I still think the same thing is true, that you need an outline. Like, you don't just write a book without an outline. And I just don't think that writer's block is a thing. I think that's a fantasy, right? Oops, sorry. I think that's like a fantasy, to get out of the work you need to do. And I think even with freelance writers and journalists, like I know I've struggled with it. I know other people have struggled with it as freelance writers. I think it's still applicable because there's a lot of misinformation out there about people writing stories. And I think a lot of the stuff that we've seen, right? Like every time they tell a story, it's always someone sitting at a blank typewriter being like, gosh, why can't I write this Pulitzer Prize winning news article, right? I think it does apply, but I think it's more like understanding that you need to have an outline and you need to have information, research, quotes, some kind of stuff to work with, right? Okay, yes, electrical meat. You can steal that. I'm not going to TM it right now, but electrical meat is a good one. Yeah, I think it just depends. I think it depends on what you're working in. So like I did the same thing where like when I was working in school, I worked on fiction and then kind of moved into journalism. I think it just depends. Like a lot of times there's this misunderstanding of how to construct a piece. And a lot of people think you're just supposed to write it basically from memory, which would be Nuttown. You would need to have some kind of structure to follow, right? That would be the writer's block thing. Okay, Karen says, I know there's a lot of comments in here that I haven't gotten to yet, so I'm trying to get through them. So Karen says, I just found you recently and got here last week and today. I'm going to miss the lives for a while. Back to school on Monday. She's a teacher. Wish I found you sooner in the summer. Well, Karen, there's a lot of stuff that you can rewatch. There's like, I've been doing this live stream for like almost 3 years now. So there's lots of things that you can go back on. And like, you know, there's times where like making it live is just not possible. That's totally fine. But you can always come back. You can always come hang out when you have time off from being a teacher. I actually have a bunch of students who are teachers or like who are leaving teaching to become freelance writers. So yeah, just try to, I think the thing is like, you can watch them, you know, when you have time, but you can also submit questions, right? That's something that I always say. So Karen, if you're working along and you're like, I have a question, or I want you to cover this topic so I can watch it later, go to mandyellis.com/question and submit it. So a lot of times I'll have people who can't make it live, but they'll submit a topic or a question and I'll come in here and do it. So if there's ever anything you want me to cover, feel free to pop it in there. Okie dokie. Yeah, you have to write the plot first, then you're writing the script. Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, thank you. I'll put it in a poem. Okay, Vicky. Yeah, I think a lot of times the writer's block thing is just a reason. It's like another thing to keep you stopping and stuck. And I don't think it's like, I don't think it's something that should be affecting you on your day to day, as a writer. And I think a lot of times when you're eating an elephant, right, when you're doing it bite by bite, you start realizing how much stuff you actually have to work with, and you start realizing what you can do to enrich a piece or to add something in or to make something better, and understand that, like, I think this process too, right? This is why a lot of people think they're good writers, because they can write an email or because they wrote like a one-page document one time, right? They're not. We are writers and we struggle with it, right? Because it's hard to do. It's hard to put the right words in the right order. It's really hard to weave in research and quotes and make everything. Is your foot stuck? Make everything sound good. Here you go. Does that help? There you go. It's just really difficult to do, right? Even for writers. A lot of people think that it's sort of like a mechanic, right? They're like, oh, you've done this 100 times, just like twist the nozzle and it'll, put the engine back in, right? Like it's not like that at all. We're not tweaking a car, right? We're definitely mechanics, but there's a lot more buttons to push. There's a lot more things to deal with and a lot more tools. So I think a lot of times it's just, we're struggling with writing because it's hard to do. This is why we should get paid well for our work. Other people might think they're good at writing, but we're good at writing and it's still hard, right? It's hard because it's this, I always think of it as like a puzzle. Like you're looking at a blank puzzle where you have no idea where everything goes until the end. Like you put the puzzle together as you work, and at the end you're like, oh, it's a cat, hanging with a balloon, right? Or it's like Charlie, right? The puzzle is Charlie. So it's like, there's a lot of these things that I think just are really important to notice, to get out of being stuck, to eat the elephant bite by bite, to get away from writer's block and understand why you should charge well for your work, right? Albert says, the only time I had a blank typewriter as a writer was when I had a snack or a lunch break. That's funny. If you feel like this has been helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about building a freelance writing business, subscribe. Karen says, yes, I want to watch some stuff from the past. I intend to leave teaching in 2 years and want to get my freelance going this year. Do it. But Karen, just remember, bite by bite. Take little pieces as you go along. So like learn how to do little things, right? Learn how to, learn how to get your clients. Like the most important thing I think a lot of freelance writers miss is like they're not understanding that like you don't have work if you don't have clients, right? So understand if you want to get some publications, right? Send some ideas out, whether you want to work with more publications or you want to work with business clients, what types of work you want to do. A lot of this stuff is covered in a bunch of different live streams, but kind of get a structure of at least like, what are you going to work on? Who do you want to work with? That kind of stuff. Okay, moving along to 3. Hold on, where did 3 go? There it is. 3. Okay, 3 here. So I think I'm going to put them, you know what? So let's talk about this. So what I have in my notes is shrinking doubt mountain down to manageable molehills. So we're going to shrink doubt mountain down to manageable molehills. So as we're kind of moving along in this stuck or stopped thing, doubt mountain is so much bigger than the actual work you have to do, right? These manageable molehills are actually getting the work done. The doubts and the way you feel about yourself and your work and the frustration and the fear and the scarcity and like the low confidence, that is doubt mountain, and that's always harder to climb than actually doing the work, right? Right? Do you agree? Would you like to say something? She sat back up. She's like, give me a snack. I don't know if you can catch them. I don't know if I want to throw them. You used to catch them all the time, but I don't know if I want you to catch them with all your dental stuff yet. So anyways, when we're talking about this is kind of the same thing. Doubt mountain is something that you climb over a very long period of time as you do the work, as you go through these manageable molehills, right? So these are kinds of you getting tasks done, and then doubt mountain, you climb it and you get to the top and you're like, oh, I didn't need to worry about any of that stuff, right? So think about it as like your manageable molehills are getting things done, whether that piece is finding clients, like I said, find like a little bite every day, finding clients, connecting with people on LinkedIn, learning how to do your LOIs, your letters of introduction to businesses, writing a pitch, getting articles published in your favorite blog or magazine, working to move forward on increasing your rates, setting up your invoicing systems, your processes for doing all your stuff. All of those things need to be done, right? All of those little tiny steps are the molehills that you cross. Doubt Mountain is like how you have to beat your own mind in order to do it, right? Doubt Mountain is like everybody has a different kind of tape running in their head. Sorry. And Doubt Mountain is this unique journey that you go on to beat your mindset blocks, the things that you tell yourself to keep yourself back, or the things that you think are really not helping you in your career or something like that, that you have to like move forward, or the things that are really not working that you finally have to get rid of, right? There's a lot of things that are going with Doubt Mountain. Think of Doubt Mountain as a very long-term journey, okay? I still climb many Doubt Mountains over the years. I still do it now. Right now, even right now, I have a bunch of things that like are up in the air that I feel really worried about. That is part of me dealing with Doubt Mountain, right? It's part of me dealing with all of the complicated things sometimes that go with running my freelance writing business, my coaching business, and the 2 courses that I have. Like there's a lot of moving parts sometimes where everything just falls in the poop soup. And most of the time it's fine. 10% of the time it's poop soup, right? And it's climbing Doubt Mountain. But even when I'm doing that, it's about taking those little steps over time. It's like breaking Doubt Mountain down to manageable molehills, right? So these things are, instead of looking at this giant picture or looking at climbing all of Everest, right? Even when you climb Mount Everest, you go through phases, right? You can't just like arrive and climb Mount Everest. It's not how it works. You go through like, what is it called? Like the thing where you get used to the altitude. You go through like different altitudes. You get to base camp 1 and base camp this and then this thing and then you climb this. There's so many different phases of climbing Everest that I think are kind of like running our business. We get to different phases and then we got to climb the thing and come back down, right? Yeah, it does sound like a Disney movie, Escape Doubt Mountain. Maybe someday. So I think it's just kind of like, oh, and Albert says, when I gave my last seminar, the basics in the past, one of my tenets is to advise writers to write at least 10 minutes minimum a day. At least you're working and focusing on something. Yes, that can be super helpful. Just doing a little bit every day, a little bit of writing, just keep the wheels greased. That can be super helpful. Okay. The poop soup is something I say a lot. It's just, I feel like that is a very easy way for me to describe like how I just feel like I'm marinating in a bunch of shit. That's what I feel like. Like there's a lot of times where things just go to hell and you're like, God damn it. Like why is this happening right now? But the deal is you still have to get out of the poop soup. You still have to stop marinating in the shit. You still have to go take a shower and you still have to figure your shit out, because if you just live in the poop soup, you don't get anywhere. It just becomes this horrible life of like just devastation, basically. So in any case, when we're moving to our off of like Doubt Mountain and the molehills, they work together. So as we're kind of getting through these doubts that are holding you back, we are getting over acclimation. There we go. We're getting over the like things that we used to be afraid of. These mini molehills, these like manageable molehills that we're doing, that's giving you the confidence to climb higher on Doubt Mountain, right? It's giving you the confidence to kind of move beyond these roadblocks. I think those kind of ways of thinking about it really help you get out of being stuck and get out of your mental soup, right? It kind of helps you be like, okay, I've done 10 tasks. At least I'm doing something. And eventually that moves to like actually getting on the train and getting a really good train going, right? So it's more about like, you have to build the train. Part of it is building the train. And then eventually people get stuck either with the directions to build the train, or it's like getting the train going where you have to shovel a lot of that coal or wood or however old your train is. I don't care, gas, whatever. I usually think about it as like the train from like Back to the Future 3. So I'm like, magic wood. So anyways, you get stuck somewhere along the way. But the deal with the train is that once you get it up to speed, right, it takes a while for a train to get up to its cruising speed, and then it takes a while for that train to slow down, right? Miles. It takes multiple miles for that train to get up to its cruising speed, and then it takes multiple miles for that train to slow down. This is part of getting over Doubt Mountain and doing the manageable molehills. You cannot get the train up to speed immediately. You have to do it over a period of time. But once it's running, then you feel like you can climb Doubt Mountain while you deal with these manageable molehills, right? So you're climbing up Doubt Mountain and you're like, boop, you like hop over these molehills. Those things build confidence as you go along. Those things make you feel like you can continue moving forward. It's the action that ends up killing. I don't know if you can catch it. I don't want to throw it because I'm worried that it's going to hit you in the tooth and you're going to have like a rough time. So it's all of these continual like basically steps in believing you can do it that you then believe you can do it, right? You have to take the action in order to crush all of those doubts, right? You have to actually move forward and take action. That's the only thing that gets rid of it, right? Yeah, Everest is a good analogy. Flower Power says, I hate Mount Doubt. I'm climbing it and it's hard. I think what's also difficult is thinking that, well, if I was actually good at this, then would I be worried? Oh my gosh, this is so good. Okay, Flower Power. I've thought this to myself so many times. So many times. This is actually a really good point. So a lot of times I was like, well, if I was a good writer, this wouldn't be so difficult. Well, if I was good at, sending my LOIs, or if I was good at finding clients, or if I was good at this, then it wouldn't be so hard or time consuming or terrible or stressful or worrisome. And that's just like straight up not the case. As I've written so many articles now that it took me a lot, hundreds, like I've written hundreds of articles, and it took me like more than probably 200 articles, or maybe not 200, but many, like 150, to actually believe I could do it. And I'm hoping that telling you this makes it so you don't wait as long as I did. But there's this thing where like you eventually outweigh it so much. You're like, I've done 100 articles. Like I can't be that bad, right? That's what the thought that changed for me was. Like I had done so many that I was like, well, it can't be that bad because editors still want to work with me and my ideas are getting picked up and I'm getting clients. Like it can't be that bad, right? So that's the thing, is like you started this thing, well, if I was good, it would be this, but it's not true. Like it's just not true. You're good. You just have to start realizing that sooner. So like for me, it took so much stuff for me to be like, well, I've outweighed it now, right? Like I've done this so many times, like hundreds of times, that it can't possibly be that bad, right? But that's the thing, is like, it's just, that's not the case, right? There are lots of writers, many writers who are very prolific, whether you're looking at fiction, journalism or fiction or poetry or whatever. They're very prolific, but it takes them forever to do it, right? That's part of it. It's a hard process. It's not a matter of being good and it being fast. Good and fast aren't always the same thing. Like, for me, there's a bunch of pieces that I'm really proud of, and they have all taken way different amounts of time. Some pieces I wrote in a day, and some pieces it took me like 3 weeks to do all the research and get all the quotes and put everything together and whatever. It just depends, right? That doesn't mean it's any better or worse. Those are still two pieces that I really love. It's not speed that determines how good you are. That's what I think is kind of nuts, is like, people are like worried about speed, or they think that there's some kind of magic metric that if they hit it, they're going to feel good. And it's just not the case. You have to believe your work is good, right? And the cool thing about writing is that your work should always be getting better, right? So if you can believe your work is good now, imagine how good it is in 5 years when you've been, or even a year, right? I look back on stuff I did a year ago and I'm like, oh, poor you, that's not good, right? So we should always be kind of pushing ourselves. And with writing, we can continually get better. That's what's really neat about our skills, is like the more you work at it, oh my gosh, you look so funny. The more we work at it, the more we are sharpening it, the more we're reading and learning from other people in terms of structure, or in terms of how to talk about something, or descriptions, or style or tone, the better our work gets, right? And that's something that is like an iron sharpens iron kind of thing. So I think this is a really important thing to remember as a freelance writer. There's no thing that's like, if you were X, then Y would happen. That's just, there are people, okay, There are people I know who are great writers. I've read their work and they just like won't get out there. They just like won't do it. They're afraid to do it. They're worried this thing's going to happen, and they're great writers. There are people who I've talked to who are not great writers, who have written for a bunch of publications where I'm like, how did you do that? You know, and I'm not saying their work is bad. I'm just saying like I've read work from people who I think their stuff is better and they're not as far out there, right? It's more about trying. It's more about getting out there. Um, it's more about sending pitches or sending LOIs or just like, you know, getting things out into the air instead of like leaving them in the cupboard. But there's no kind of like, this is such a good thing because I used to think this all the time. Oh, well, so this goes back to the compare and despair, right? Oh, well, if I was X writer, I would have already been in X magazine. If I was X writer, it would only take me 3 hours. If I was so and so, then this would happen. And another good example is, I think I've talked about her before on here, but yeah, Magic Metrics. I talked about her before on here. So Natasha Ralph, RELPH. So Natasha Ralph, she has a newsletter. It's called The Wordling. If you guys haven't signed up, you should. But she wrote her weekly newsletter this week, and it was about how she had 21 deadlines from clients. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want that. I don't want to do that, right? But that's something that energizes her. So if I start comparing, like when I was writing 20 articles a month, I was like, I'm going to die. Like, this is not for me, right? But some people end up have 21 deadlines a month, and that energizes them. They love that. They love that super snappy, like boom, 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 turning in work. That is not me. I'm not fast. I'm not a fast writer. It's like, that just doesn't work for me. I would rather work on a content strategy project that's multiple months long. I would rather work on a few reported articles. That for me is a better cadence. But if I was sitting there comparing, right, like, oh, well, if I was as good as Tasha, I could have 21 deadlines a month, right? That's crazy. I don't want that, right? That's like kind of how I started burning out several years ago, right? So we don't want to get into this. If I was good, then I would do this, right? Even me comparing to writers, like Tasha, I think has been writing for many years more than I have. But even if I'm comparing that stuff, that's not going to help me, right? I'm not saying like, oh, you know, if I was as good as her, I should be doing this. And her work is great. Her work is fantastic, right? But it doesn't mean that we work the same way, right? So these things are really important to kind of think about. And I think this is a great point that Flower Power made, is like, when we get into this trap of like, if I was this, then I could do this. That's just not the case. And it's sort of like your business goes through these metamorphoses, right? Oh, and another good thing I think that this brings up too, actually, I think Albert's comment is a good one. So the same thing with like Mount Everest, right? People don't just go climb Mount Everest. The thing about, I've watched like multiple documentaries recently on this. That's why I like am bringing it up. So there's these different things, right? In order to climb Everest, you have to be a really good, I was going to say adept. You have to be really adept at several different types of climbing. You can't just be a good rock climber. You have to be good on snow and ice. And they mentioned all these other things. So like just to do the alpine stuff, right? When you're trying to free climb, like Albert's talking about, it's just like a way different thing, right? Free climbing is way different than all the equipment you need and the oxygen, right, that you need for Everest. And Everest, you have to have a bunch of different skills in order to do it. And the other thing about like Everest is that it's an amazing accomplishment, but it is incredibly difficult, right? There are so many skills and things you need to know how to do, and you can't do it alone, right? In order to climb Everest, you go with a Sherpa, right? These people who climb Everest all the time, they're professional Sherpas. That's their job. You can't just like go do it. I mean, I guess you could, but actually, I don't even know if you can anymore, but you have to go with a Sherpa. If you don't go with a Sherpa, that's a bad idea. But there's a lot of different things that we kind of forget about, right? We forget that if you're climbing Everest, you're going with someone who's trained, that you have to train. You can't just like show up and be like, let's do it, right? That's not how it works. There's all these different things you do. And these are the same things that you would do to get over your mindset humps, right? Get over these kind of roadblocks and kind of move forward. And someone doesn't just like train for Everest in a day. People can train years to go to Everest. People can train months, like depending on where they are in climbing slash health scale, right? It's really important stuff to remember. Okay. Yes. Hello. She says it's time for snacks. Flower Power says, related to this, hold on a second. Related to this, how do you determine the difference in your work between something hard that's a challenge you can overcome versus when you may not be a good fit for the specific project? Ooh, Flower Power, great question. So the thing about this is, for me, this is what I tell my students. It's like a smell. I know that sounds crazy, but there's this thing that happens with both clients and your work where you have to do enough repetition to kind of get it. But once you get it, it becomes apparent. It's like a smell. So what ends up happening is you do work and you're like, okay, this is difficult, whatever. But eventually you get to the point where you've done so much repetition, and it doesn't have to be hundreds of things. It could be like 20 things. And what ends up happening is that you are starting to realize, like, oh, this isn't hard because the topic is hard. This is hard because either my client is expecting something different, or I'm not a fit for it, or this isn't working for me. This is a smell you develop over time. It's like burnt toast. And I'm not saying a literal smell, but I mean, like, it strikes you as a smell. Like, I know now when I'm working on something, I'm like, this is not a fit. Like, I had something earlier, like before, a client I was working with where I was like, this is not a fit. I've had this many times. This is just like a recent example, but I knew it wasn't a fit. Like, I was just doing the work and I'm like, what they're asking me to do and how they're asking me to do it. And this is really confusing. I don't think this is the right fit. So this is an experience thing. This is something where this is kind of like a fall down, scrape your knee kind of deal. There's going to be times where you work on a project and it falls through and your client's going to fire you and you're going to be like, what happened? And then a few months later, you're going to be like, oh, I should have just left that project because it wasn't a fit. This is something that is like seasoning a cast iron pan. You have to kind of do it over time and you kind of have to understand how to do it, right? It's something that is based on feeling out who's right for you. A lot of times this comes from writers finally understanding who's the right client for you versus versus the hold on one second versus work that's really difficult. Like, there's work that you do where you feel like you're making progress and you feel like you're getting somewhere and you're like, okay, I just know it's a lot of research. I know that I have to be diligent about putting these quotes in the right place. I know that this is something complicated versus like you kind of, as you write, you feel like you're fighting an internal battle. Like, there's a lot of times where I work on something where I'm like, I know this isn't right. Like, I'm fighting this internal battle where either what my client's asking for, I'm like, that's not right. We should be doing it A instead of B. Or I have conflicting values on the content where they're like, we just want to do this. And I'm like, you should do this. Or you start fighting these internal battles of how you do the content or what you're talking about or the structure of the piece or what the goals are. And then you start developing that burnt toast smell where you're like, oh, this project just isn't for me. Like, this client is not my client. They should be with a writer who's the right writer for them. So this, for me, there's like, I wish that I could make a magic thing and make it so that other writers don't have to go through it. But from watching my students and watching in like my own business, this is one of those, like, you have to have experience. Like, there's no way that I can tell you whether something or not is a fit for you unless you have a very specific situation, right? So Flower Power, you came to me and you're like, hey, all these weird things are happening. And I'm like, well, 1 and 2 are kind of normal, but 3 through 6 are weird. This client's probably not a fit for you, right? So these are things where you're going to have to fall down, scrape your knees, get fired sometime. We've all been fired. I'm probably, there's still going to, it's not even firing. It's just like the contract gets canceled. But there's going to be these times where you're just going to realize it's not a fit, but it's something that you have to get through experience. It's something that you have to work with clients. It's something that it's the only way that I just think about it is like it's developing a smell. It's just like burnt toast. Like, you're just like, something's burning, right? Like, it's just an immediate thing where you're like, something's on fire in this house. And it's something where you have to learn your own stuff. And it's the same example, right, that I gave of my friend. Her doing 21 deadlines is energizing for her. She likes it. When I was doing that many deadlines or a little bit above, I just like wanted to die. I hated it. It was not for me. And that was something I had to learn through burning out. It was something where I had to fall down and scrape my knee and figure out like what works for me and what doesn't. So there's times where you have to figure out a lot of times who's a good client for you and who's not. This is something too that I talk about with my students, right? This is something we go through like a bunch of like, who's your ideal client? What do they do? Are they relaxed, or are they people who are to the point? Are they people who communicate on 4 different platforms or only email you? Are your ideal clients people who, like they have a relaxed timeline, or do you like to do work quickly? Or are your ideal clients people with these long-term projects, or do you like to do smaller things? Like there's lots of things that we learn in the process of like who our ideal clients are, and then we apply that to our business, right? We apply those things to how we're going to move forward with that, right? Albert says, my experience with freelancing for more than 22 years is that it isn't about pure talent, but the ability to be consistent, basically consistently survive. So that means being able to be hired, published, and then paid. I think that the consistency piece is that's the thing. Like the reason that I'm here is because I didn't give up. Like there's lots of times I've wanted to give up. There's lots of times I'm like, this is too hard. I'm not right for this. My clients hate me. I'm sucking at my work. There's lots of times I've wanted to give up. But because I didn't give up, I get to do cool stuff like talk to you on this live stream, right? I get to do cool stuff like come on here and bring my dogs, right? And I get to do fun stuff with Charlie and when Bo was here with Bo, right? So I feel like this is just kind of like the consistency piece is also getting over all of the tough stuff, right? The consistency piece is also like kind of our number 4 here is like getting the pep back in your step. So hold on, let me switch numbers so we have it tracked. So putting the pep back in your writer step, a lot of that is consistency. A lot of that is just like Albert said, is like you have to keep moving forward, right? Regardless of the feel. There's lots of times where I'm like, this isn't going to work. I should just give up. I should just quit, right? And especially when I burned out, right? Especially when I burned out in 2018 when I was like, I'm going to go work at Dairy Queen. I don't know why I said that. It just, I don't know why. But I just wanted to quit everything. And it's part of the process is like sometimes putting your feelings aside and getting stuff done. We have lots of thoughts and lots of feelings, and sometimes we need to put that to the back burner to get it done. I'm not saying sacrifice your mental health, and I'm not saying go into burnout town. I'm just saying that sometimes when you are feeling a lot of self-doubt and a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of negative self-talk, just turn the volume down a bit and get to work. There's lots of times where that consistency, ability to turn the volume down on negative thoughts and move forward, that really helps. I'm not saying, I'm of course not saying sacrifice your mental health. I'm not saying do anything crazy like I did. I'm not saying like burn out. I'm saying that like there are times when we get so consumed with our thoughts that that's actually taking away from our ability to do stuff. And we need to give that basically like that power and that electricity back to getting stuff done. That's how we're putting the pep back in our writing step, right? Is that consistency, that ability to move forward. And this is another weird thing, right? Is that, keep your nose peeled for burnt toast. Yeah. This is another thing I think is really important is like my every time I wanted to quit and I kind of like started over was a really important thing for my business. So every time I wanted to quit and every time I've wanted to give up, it's changed my business a lot. I've decided that there's things I can't keep doing or things I don't want to do or different ways I want to run my business, right? And then that changes how it works and I build a better business. So for me, a lot of times I'm one of those people that like I have to fall down and scrape my knees and get bloodied and bruised in order to make a change sometimes because I'm like, this isn't working, but we should keep doing it, right? And I've learned a lot from that over the years, right? I've done that many times, but a lot of times when you get to that place, you just kind of have to look at your business. You kind of have to look how you've been doing things and review that and move forward and make changes. Sometimes that's the impetus that you need to kind of do that. P. says, I love Charlotte. I think Mandy is exceptional. You have so much great knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. Here's Charlie. She decided to lay back down. Charlie, you want a snacko? You want a little Treato? Yeah? Do you want to do a little high fives for everybody? Can you do a little high five? Just a little one? Yeah, good girl. Good job. We haven't really been doing as many high fives just because she's been kind of having a rough time with her teeth and she hasn't been like that interested. Can you show everyone belly? Can we try belly? Yeah, kind of. Belly? A little bit? Good girl. Good job. She's such a cutie. The other thing, too, I think with the pep in your writing step is just realizing it's part of the process. There's always going to be a time where there's going to be times throughout your writing career where you're going to feel stuck and you want to stop and you want to just kind of like quit, or you just feel like you can't move forward. That's just like tires in the mud, right? There's very rare times where people just leave their car and they're like, oh, well, I lost my car in the mud. It's forever gone, right? That there would be rare instances where you can't get the car out, right? You call the tow truck or you get a piece of wood or you use a piece of carpet or a jacket to get the car out of the mud, right? You kind of have to be inventive in how you get it out of there, right? Or you get somebody to come and pull you out. But this is kind of part of it, is I always kind of imagine it as a car stuck in the mud, and you're not just going to leave your car there and abandon your car, right? Like very rarely is a car lost to the mud, right? So I think that this is just part of the process. There's going to be times that are tough and we got to get through those. There are going to be times where we have to like cut down on the mental chatter. There are going to be times where we are, in the poop soup, and that's just part of it. Sometimes you're just marinating in the poop soup. That's just, that's just, I've been stuck in the mud many times, including recently. There's like stuff where it's just a lot sometimes. And it's just kind of this taking little bites, doing little bits of stuff, getting myself organized. And instead of marinating on the couch, watching the same movie 65 times, which I definitely want to do lots of times, I have to kind of take these little steps forward. And I have to remind myself that it's not forever. That's something that I think is really important, is like none of these things are forever. Lots of times when I'm in the poop soup, I'm like, this is it. I'm living in the poop soup. But it never lasts. It's never it's never a super long process, right? Even if the poop soup lasts years, it eventually stops. You have to make different choices, right? So you start realizing the longer the poop soup goes on, you're like, something's off, right? I need to make different choices. I need to do an analysis of my business or how I'm running my life or how I'm dealing with stress or how I'm dealing with mental health or how I'm dealing with things I haven't dealt with in many years, or there's a lot of different questions that we have to ask, and it is hard. It's not fun. It's not a fun process, but sometimes you have to do it in order to move forward. It's something that it's like a reckoning, right? You have like a reckoning where you're like, all right, this I can't live like this anymore. I can't deal with this, and you kind of have to move forward, right? You have to answer the tough questions, and I feel like there's a lot of like, one of the reasons that I think for me, I've grown a lot in the last 10 years is just I keep asking myself hard questions. And I don't always have the answer, but I'm at least willing to kind of entertain them, right? I'm willing to entertain the hard stuff, or I'm willing to fix the things that are broken, or I'm willing to just be in the poop soup. And the more that I push myself outside my comfort zone, the longer I can handle being in uncomfortable situations. So in the beginning, it was like anytime there was even remotely a little bit of uncomfortableness, I would freak out. Now I can be uncomfortable for months and I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be all right. So it doesn't last forever. The uncomfortableness is part of being out of your comfort zone, but there's also an adjustment. So kind of look at that. What would you like to say? Would you like to add any positive words, Charlie? Would you like to tell the people some things? You're like, I would like some snacks. Oh my gosh, you're gonna do a high five? Yay! Good girl! Oh my gosh, we've been really starved for high fives over here just because she's been having such a tough time. Can't believe we just got some. Can you do some high fives for everybody? Good girl. Can you do the other one? Just that one? That's okay. I'll take it. Okay. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope this has been something that kind of helps you. Oh man, I got dog drool over my hands that I just got all over my computer. Um, I hope that this has been helpful, and if it has, give it a thumbs up. If you feel like this has been helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want to learn more about building, um, a strong freelance writing business where you can kind of move forward, subscribe. Last kind of comments on this: Runway is open right now, so if you want to join Runway, it's my live 5-day class with a bonus masterclass the following week. So every single day we get on live, and I teach you a class for about an hour. Then we do Q&A. This is $200 off the lifetime version. So the live version is me every single day for 5 days. The lifetime version is you get to keep everything, right? It's all the all the materials for the class, and you get to keep it as lifetime of the class. So it's $200 off that. It's $49. The class is going to be August 14th through the 18th. The class time is noon Pacific. Right, yeah, noon Pacific time, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. British Standard Time. And that's going to be enrolling until Thursday. So it's open until August 10th. And if you feel like that's a fit, go check it out, mandyellis.com/runway. This is something, like I said before, it'll be a class that I probably will teach it in March or April. I'm considering it maybe a January class. I'm not totally sure. So if you want to join Runway in 2023, this is your last chance for 2023. If you don't want to join the live version, when live is over, you can get the lifetime version and you get to keep everything. The live version is like we're doing everything and you get to keep worksheets, you get to keep all the stuff, but you don't get to keep replays. So you can watch the replays as many times as you want, but it's not the same thing as lifetime access. Cool. Okay, good. I'm glad that this was helpful. I hope everybody has a really good weekend. Charlie hopes everybody has a good weekend, even though she looks a little grumpy. You're not grumpy. You're so cute. You have these funny little ears. Her ears are so expressive. Is that true? Are your ears expressive? What do you think? You're like, more snacks. Good girl. All right, I'll see you guys. We're here every Friday at noon Central Time. If you ever have a topic or question, pop it into mandyellis.com/question and I will cover it. And if you haven't grabbed my free pricing guide, grab it. mandyellis.com/pricing guide, free pricing guide for freelance writers and content strategists. I update it regularly. Like, I'll probably do another update by the end of the year, but grab it. Okay, I'll see you guys next Friday. Hope everybody has a good weekend. Bye.